Welcome to Shift Change, the Idaho Manufacturing Podcast. Over the course of about 20 minutes, we bring you conversations on AI, tech, and the future of Idaho manufacturing. Funding for this program comes from Total Care IT, your Idaho-based IT and cybersecurity partner for manufacturers.
Welcome to Shift Change, Idaho's manufacturing podcast. If you're leading a manufacturing operation here in Idaho, managing precision equipment, optimizing those supply chains, running critical shop floor controllers, you know your business runs on data, but that deep reliance on technology, well, it's necessary, obviously, but it also exposes you to a pretty dizzying array of external demands. We're talking regulatory requirements, maybe SOX or the intense pressure of CMMC 2.0 if you work with the defense industrial base, or sometimes just proving to a major customer that their data is actually safe. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to give you the executive shortcut, basically, to understanding who does what. We're drawing that absolutely critical line between your managed service provider, maybe someone like Total Care IT, and the external auditors or certifying bodies. We really need to clarify who builds the system and, who signs the paper.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that manufacturing leaders, they need to be strategic, right? They aren't trying to become cybersecurity experts overnight. They just want efficiency. They need their digital foundation to be robust enough to pass muster with customers, with auditors, hopefully the first time. The core challenge isn't just like buying tools, it's knowing how to align your internal operations and your MSP's work to achieve that compliance alignment without getting completely drowned by bureaucratic requirements.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then with a really critical distinction. Before we look at any service contracts or anything, we need to separate two terms that I think get conflated all the time: cybersecurity and compliance. They're related, sure, but treating them as the same thing is probably the fastest route to audit failure.
Definitely. Think of it this way. If you were building a new manufacturing facility, cybersecurity is the actual construction. It's the materials, the crew, the doors, the locks, maybe the fire suppression system. It's really the umbrella term for the tools and controls your IT team puts in place to actively protect the business, from cybercrime, negligence, or disaster. And the choice of these controls, it's typically guided by a specific security framework your company decides to adhere to.
Okay, so if security is the materials and the labor, the actual build, what's compliance then?
Compliance, well, that's more like the zoning board and the building inspector. It refers to the governance of your entire data security program. This is your written documentation, your policies, your procedures, your business continuity plan, your disaster recovery plan. Compliance focuses on mitigating and transferring business risk by proving that you're following the rules, essentially the framework you chose.
Ah, I see. So that means you could have great security, strong walls, great locks. But if you didn't file the correct blueprints with the city, you fail the inspection, which means those robust security controls have to be constantly monitored and, crucially, carefully documented to create that verifiable trail of evidence. Is that right?
Exactly right. The evidence is everything. An auditor doesn't care if your firewall is the absolute best on the market. They care that the firewall logs are retained correctly and that your written policy actually dictates how those logs are reviewed and, who reviews them. Without that documentation, those expensive controls, they just don't count toward compliance.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for the executive, I think. If compliance governance is the strategy, the managed service provider, the MSP, is kind of the implementation arm. So what exactly does an MSP design and run for a manufacturing firm here in Idaho? Are they just like fixing computers when they break?
Oh, far from it. Their primary, really foundational role is to design, implement, and then run a specialized security infrastructure. And this isn't just plug-and-play IT. This infrastructure is specifically designed to align your operations with common regional and federal expectations. Things like NIST 800-171 or CMMC for federal contracts, the FTC's reasonable security mandate, and of course, Idaho's own breach notification rules. And they often act as the strategic architect through something called the VCIO role, the Virtual Chief Information Officer. This VCIO function helps manage your security strategy, your budget, and continuously reviews your risks, but in a board-level context. They provide that business perspective.
Okay, so the VCIO sets the strategy.
Yeah.
What are the maybe 3 key technical blueprints they have to lay down for a manufacturer to build up this evidence base we keep talking about?
Yeah, we can definitely highlight 3 components that usually form the standard compliance-ready stack. First, you absolutely need SAE, the Secure Access Service Edge. For manufacturers, with plants maybe in Boise and Idaho Falls, warehouses in Nampa, and remote workers everywhere else, this is vital. SASE enforces identity-first access, mandatory multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and device health checks across all your assets.
And what's the biggest compliance win you get from SaaS, like the real practical benefit?
I'd say network segmentation. SaaS allows you to effectively separate your operational technology, your OT and industrial control systems, your ICS networks, the ones running your CNC machines, or specialized timber processing systems, maybe from the general IT network that handles things like payroll and email. This is a really foundational requirement for frameworks like CMMC Level 2. It makes sure, basically, that a problem on the IT side doesn't instantly jump over to the shop floor and shut down production.
Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. What's the second critical blueprint then?
That would be MXDR, Managed Extended Detection and Response. Think of this as your 24/7 security monitoring team. But they aren't just waiting for an alarm to go off. They're actively hunting for threats, triaging alerts, and, crucially, providing rapid containment. That means isolating a compromised computer, blocking malicious indicators, killing bad processes. If a breach actually happens, their speed is what limits the damage significantly and gives your legal team a fighting chance to meet Idaho's without unreasonable delay notification rule.
Right, speed is key there. And the third, that repository of evidence we mentioned earlier.
That's SIEM and log retention. So SIEM is the centralized system that collects, correlates, and stores basically every digital breadcrumb from your firewalls, identity systems, endpoints, everything. The SIEM has to be tuned, though, to focus on material risk. You can't watch everything equally. And the log retention period must be sized specifically to accommodate deep investigations and mandatory audits. This evidence repository, the logs themselves, network diagrams, backup test results, that's the crucial collection of evidence the MSP maintains for you.
Okay, so we've established what they build and what they run. Now we hit that critical question I think every executive asks. If I pay my MSP to set up this, supposedly bulletproof system, what happens when an external auditor or some certifying body walks in and tells me I failed? Isn't there like a conflict of interest?
That is probably the highest stakes question in this entire conversation, and it's exactly why the boundary is so critical. Let's use a manufacturing analogy again. Think of the MSP as the team that builds services and maintains the custom safety cage around a machine, maybe the emergency shutoffs and the hazard signs. Those are the security controls. But an MSP, like Total Care IT, for instance, is not a certifying body. They are not a C3PO for CMMC. They absolutely do not issue certificates. They build and operate the controls that make compliance alignment achievable. The auditor, or the C3PAO, they're like the OSHA inspector who comes in and determines if that safety cage and your associated written policies actually meet the official regulatory standard. They issue the formal certificate.
Got it. So the MSP gives you the ingredients and builds the oven, maybe maintains the oven, but they absolutely cannot bake the compliance cake or certify that the oven meets code. Okay. What other boundaries must an executive be really aware of?
Some critical ones. The MSP does not provide legal advice, period. If an incident occurs, they provide the technical facts, what they did for containment, the logs, the timelines, other incident artifacts. But it's your legal or compliance team that handles the actual breach notifications and regulatory filings under Idaho or federal rules. The MSP is essentially the technical witness, not the lawyer making the legal call. Also, and this is a big one, they will not fill out cyber insurance forms for you. They will advise you on your security posture. They'll show you the asset list, the active controls, the evidence they've collected, so you can fill out those forms accurately. The responsibility, the liability for completing and signing those binding representations, that always rests with the organization's executive leadership.
Okay, super clear. Let's shift our focus a bit now to CMMC 2.0. Idaho certainly has a significant defense industrial-based presence, particularly in specialized manufacturing, metals, maybe weapons components. What does the MSP help you with when, say, Level 2 is required for handling controlled unclassified information, or CUI?
Right. If you handle CUI, you're almost certainly looking at CMMC Level 2. That requires implementing all 110 controls from NIST SP 800-171. And depending on your specific contract priority, you might face either an annual self-assessment or, more likely, a full third-party assessment by a certified C3PAO every 3 years. The MSP's role here is often called GRC enablement. Governance, risk, and compliance enablement. They basically bridge the gap between the technology they implemented and the dense language of the regulation. They perform the technical control mapping. So they prove, for example, that the SESI system they deployed satisfies the specific NIST requirement for access control and also maybe system integrity.
So they translate the tech stuff into audit speak, essentially.
Precisely. They deliver the evidence-ready artifacts. Maybe it's a report showing 100% of user accounts have MFA enabled, or records of successful quarterly backup restoration tests, or detailed patch compliance metrics across all servers. This is the ammunition, the proof, that your own counsel or the C3PAO needs for the formal attestation. If that evidence is scattered across 3 different systems, or worse, doesn't exist, you fail before you even start. That standardized stack the MSP built makes collecting that evidence feasible.
Before we move on from that, I want to connect something back to that SaaS discussion earlier. We talked about controlling access points across various sites. Are manufacturers seeing real problems with, unsanctioned software access cropping up?
Oh, absolutely. And this ties directly back to why unified control is so crucial. When manufacturers rush to adopt new technologies, especially things like generative AI tools right now, employees often use unsanctioned cloud platforms without approval. It's what we call shadow IT.
Yeah.
If your SES or your MXDR stack doesn't enforce consistent controls across the entire organization, every user, every plant, every single device, you end up with these uncontrolled access points. And this is exactly where shadow AI risk emerges, which is rapidly becoming a major compliance liability.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge strategic point. Okay, bringing it back home now. What's the MSP's support role specifically regarding Idaho's state law on data breaches?
So, Idaho law requires notification to affected residents without unreasonable delay if unencrypted personal information is exposed and misuse is likely. The definition of personal information in Idaho is actually quite narrow. It's usually a person's name combined with their social security number, driver's license or ID number, or certain financial account numbers with required codes. The MSP is your first technical responder in that scenario. Their job is to ensure you have rapid containment and incident response protocols already in place, tested even, and that your security stack, particularly the MXDR and SIEM, is actively preserving logs, building accurate timelines, and packaging all the incident evidence. This technical package is what allows your legal team to quickly assess the likelihood of harm and make the call on whether notification is needed and meet the state's tight without unreasonable delay timeline.
And just quickly, if we look outside of Boise or Caldwell, do manufacturers need to worry much about local city regulations on top of state law?
Not usually for private sector breaches, no. Local jurisdictions generally defer to Idaho state and federal rules for that. However, and this is important, if you're a manufacturer that ships product nationally or works with partners in other states, you might be handling vendor or customer data that triggers privacy laws in places like California or maybe New York. So the MSP's mandate really is to provide that standardized, evidence-rich environment that handles the highest common denominator of regulatory requirements. This protects you locally while also giving you the necessary infrastructure to deal with potential multi-state compliance issues down the road.
Okay, I think you now have a much clearer map. The managed service provider, your MSP, is your strategic partner for building, running, and crucially documenting the secure infrastructure. That's the controls and the evidence. The external auditor, or maybe your legal team, is responsible for the final attestations and the ultimate legal decisions, the certification, the filings, the breach notifications.
Which, raises an important final question for you to consider, tying back to those risks we just mentioned, like shadow IT. Ask yourself, if your standardized security stack that SASE, the EDR, the MXDR, isn't consistently running and enforced across all of your plants, whether they're in Boise, Idaho Falls, or somewhere else entirely, how exposed are you really to a breach caused by some unsanctioned shadow AI tool an employee decided to try? And critically, if that tool happens to expose unencrypted personal information as defined by Idaho law, could that governance failure, that lack of consistent control, actually trigger a mandatory breach notification event? That vulnerability, it's often a direct result of a technical oversight that your governance processes didn't catch in time. Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Use this knowledge to assess your current IT partnerships. Ensure your infrastructure isn't just secure, but is truly evidence-ready for that next audit or customer inquiry. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into navigating compliance in Idaho manufacturing.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Shift Change. To learn more about how IT can help your manufacturing business invest in future competitiveness, reach out to Total Care IT today.